Welcome back into another episode of Beyond Ball. And as you can see, I am without my host this week. Jacob will not be with us for this episode. I will carry us through this week. He has a bit of a commitment. Couldn't get out of it. A little bit of a fraternity moment, from what I understand. We're also both in school, so we're in midterms right now. Shouldn't chew that ice, sorry. She couldn't make it to this week, but I'm going to get us through. We do not have a sponsor this week, unfortunately. A little bit depressing. But I'll hop right into probably the biggest news of the football world at the current moment, and that is the Jets firing their head coach, Robert Saleh. The team has underperformed 100%, but I think it's important to really consider the environment. I don't like around him, specifically the offensive coordinator. Nathaniel Hackett is not a good coach. I don't really know how he got this job. He obviously was a complete disaster in Denver. We saw that. And then I believe their passing game coordinator is Todd Downing, who is a known football terrorist. If you ask anyone with a brain, really, especially Titans fans, who had to sit through that for an entire season. I just don't know how he got a job as a passing game coordinator. And then Nathaniel Hackett is your coordinator. Not ideal. So the Jets moved on from Robert Saleh. This was apparently showed up to work, walked in, fired. I don't even know how long he was there for. Walked into the facilities, fired, was actually escorted out. Didn't even get to address the team. It seems like no one on the team really knew it was coming. This is a decision that came directly from the owner, Woody Johnson, who didn't really consult anyone from what I'm reading. In his decision, this was just something he felt that was the right for the team and right to move forward without Saleh and name Jeff Ulbrich, the defensive coordinator for the Jets, to be the interim for the current position. And I think there's several suitors out there. I mean, you're already seeing, with a market like that, you're already seeing predictions on who's going to be the next head coach. We'll see how Jeff Ulbrich does in this role. I don't necessarily think he'll be the guy they end up staying with, past this season. This is the first time that Woody Johnson has actually fired a coach mid-season in 25 years that he's been the owner of the Jets. It was a surprise for sure. I think anyone that looked down, even Jets fans, looked down their phone this morning and saw that. I think it was a surprise to them. We've talked about this on the podcast before. I don't think Saleh was a very good coach, but the issue, as I've said, was with the offense, which Nathaniel Hackett was running. The offense, you have a Hall of Fame quarterback, and you can't even move the ball down the field consistently. I understand the offensive line was a little bit, suspect at best, I would say. And they can't really run the ball at all. There's not a lot of balance. We know Hackett is not a good OC or play caller. He should have been the one to blame, in my opinion. And it seems Saleh was ready to fire him before he got fired himself. So it's business. I think Saleh was cooking with that move, but fortunately he did not get to make it. Although I don't know, Todd Downing had moved up into the offensive coordinator slot. That's even worse. It's actually as bad as you can get. So I just don't understand. It doesn't seem like there's going to be a lot of blame on Hackett, or I don't believe he'll be fired either, from what I understand so far, which is a little bit odd. I think anyone that watches that team knows that Robert Saleh is defensive head coach. That's how he got his job, from being the 49ers defensive coordinator. The defense, I thought, was playing pretty good. They looked pretty good against the Vikings this past week. And that was one of the best offensives in football so far. So anyone that watches that team realizes the defense is not the issue. It's the offense. And guess who's calling those plays? It's Nathaniel Hackett, who a lot of people, especially those living in Denver, Colorado, do not like. again, Hall of Fame quarterback, and you can't really put together a competent offense. I just don't know why Saleh was the one that got cut. But I don't want to defend him too much because I don't believe he's a very good head coach. I think Jacob would share the same sentiments if he were here. So even though they have, again, like I said, they promoted Jeff Ulbrich to be their interim head coach. They have their DC running the show now. I still wouldn't be surprised if the defense takes a step back. Saleh was a defensive guy, so I do believe he had some effect on that group. And obviously, he'll most certainly find a defense coordinator job out there. I'd be shocked if he got a head coaching job based on the success that he didn't show in this position. I believe that the next job he'll find will probably be a DC job, and guess what? He'll probably do very good at that. The defenses were always pretty good while he was in New York, and then obviously in the Niners, he had a lot of success there. That's how he got his head coaching job. So that is the biggest, and we kind of jumped into this straight, but I mean, this is the biggest news going on right now, next to Davante Adams, which is what we're going to talk about right now. Oh boy, how many wide receiver contract trade talks nonsense did we all go through this offseason, and we are here again. Davante Adams would like out from the Las Vegas Raiders, has requested a trade some point over the past week. It's after we recorded our last episode, that's for sure. And he wants out. And I don't really blame him. If you look at the Raiders, not a lot to like there. Not really a quarterback that he can trust. No chance to win a ring. That's what he wants to do at this stage in his career. And then also the fact, if you look at his top two options, I think he just wants to play with the quarterback he knows. It's the Saints. We have Derek Carr, who's injured now. And it's the Jets with Aaron Rodgers, who, he both has a history of both of those quarterbacks. Carr back to his college days, and then 1 year in Vegas. And, of course, Rodgers in Green Bay for, I really don't know how long he was there for, to be honest, but they were obviously lighting up the league when they were there in Green Bay. So I think both teams make sense. Those are kind of his top two options, Jets and the Saints. I think a team, kind of a wild card out there, they're not going to make the move because, now this is really because of Stephon Diggs, but the Bills. Anyone who's watched them over the past 2 weeks in particular, and even at the start of the year, we knew they didn't really have wide receiver one, and they still don't. No one's stepping up. Not totally a surprise when you look at who's in that room, but I think that's a sleeper team. I just don't think they'll do it because they didn't want to keep Stephon Diggs around. I don't know if they're looking to make a move for another receiver like that, and especially one who is older than Stephon Diggs, if I'm not mistaken, and currently has a hamstring injury. And the Raiders want a second round pick and additional picks from whatever team they trade Davante Adams to. At this stage in his career, and with, again, the current hamstring injury, 32-year-old, I think it's a bit ridiculous. I do. Especially, they're also trying to give away his full 2024 salary, which is going to be $16 million, and the cap is $25 million this year for Davante Adams. And they're trying to offload that to whatever team they trade him to, as well as asking for a second-round pick and, God knows what else pick-wise. I think it's a bit ridiculous for the Raiders, but as an organization, I think the Raiders are doing the right thing, trying to get the most they can. We know Davante's still an elite receiver. I don't think anyone's going to sit here and question that. It's just a matter of age. You got injury now on the board, and you're trying to take all that salary, and you want to give up a second-round pick. I just don't think a lot of teams are. I think that asking price is going to come down, personally. I don't think they're going to find anyone that's going to meet those demands. And if they do, I think there's going to be something with the salary that maybe whatever team gives up the second, but just does not take all the salary, because I think that's a bit ridiculous to ask. For the top two options, we're looking at the Jets and we're looking at the Saints. That's what everyone's talking about. Again, for obvious reasons, I mentioned them. But those talks seems to have stopped. You had the Carr injury last night, Monday Night Football. Carr looks like he's going to be out for a few weeks, and the Jets just fired their head coach. So a little bit of turmoil in both places. I think personally, I think the Jets make a little more sense because I think it's more of a struggle right now. You could say the past 2 weeks for the Saints passing game has not been very good, but I think it's more of an issue for the Jets right now, especially if they're keeping Hackett around. I mean, it doesn't hurt to add an all-pro because maybe even then his offense will look competent. I think that'll change a lot of things there. Garrett Wilson has not stepped up like we all thought he would this year. Mike Williams, they're targeting Allen Lazard more. What's that about? I don't really understand that at all. Mike Williams gets a target, a couple targets a game at this point, and Lazard's out there. I know they have the connection from Green Bay, but why are you not working Mike Williams into the game? It's frustrating. I don't want to talk about it anymore. But adding Devontae Adams into this, that's a pretty good trio. You get someone, because I think it's simply Rodgers isn't on the same page with anyone except Allen Lazard right now. If you look at the Jets receivers, production wise, and you just watch the Viking games in particular, I noticed this. There was just Rodgers was missing throws, or he was on the game sealing interception to Stephon Gilmore, for example. He wants to go back shoulder. I don't know why in that situation. You look at the play, I don't know why he decided to do that. But then the ball's down there on the ground, and Stephon Gilmore, just falls down and catches it. It's right there. So the throw wasn't even good. I don't understand the decision really at that point for Rodgers. I just think he's not on the same page with the receivers right now. Give him Devontae Adams. I don't care. It's been, 3 or 4 years now since they were in Green Bay, but I think they're going to pick right up where they left off. And I think that's going to make that passing game a lot more efficient. And I think it's going to become a lot more stable there. And then flipping over to the Saints side of things, the Carr injury is going to affect some things. He's going to be out a few weeks. It's going to be the Rattler or Jake Hayner show. That's nasty. That's real nasty. He wants to go because Derek Carr's there. He wants Derek Carr as his quarterback if he were to go to New Orleans. I do not think he's going to – I think this is going to change some things. And whether the Saints were really in it or not, I think this is going to actually determine where he goes. I think it's very much more likely that he goes to the Jets or somewhere else than the Saints now. If he's not going to have – I mean, it's not a season-ending injury, but I'm just saying Carr's going to be out for a few weeks. I don't think that's a situation he's going to want to go to right now. The Saints really did not look good before Carr got injured anyway the past 2 weeks. But against the Falcons, they were fine. Against the Chiefs on Monday Night Football, that was pretty rough. It was rough to watch. The Devontae situation is apparently a sooner rather than later situation for the Raiders. They want to get this done pretty quick, but as I mentioned, some things have happened in the recent 24 hours that have changed things, and I think it's going to hinder the talks a little bit, specifically for the Jets and the Saints. Now, any other team I think is welcome. If I'm any other team, I'm jumping in right now, and I'm trying to put my bid in for Devontae Adams. If I'm in need of a top receiver, I mean, you see teams like the Ravens out there getting even the Cowboys I saw, which, I mean, if there's anyone on the market, Cowboys fans are going to start making edits and posting them all over the internet. It's a bit annoying, but those are a couple teams that are on the outskirts that you never know could make a move. The Ravens, I think that's a pretty good pickup for them, but mostly the Ravens are going to want to run the football still. So I don't know if Devontae Adams will want to go there and block. And then the Cowboys are just a bit of a mess right now. So I don't really see that as legit. I see that as delusion. I'm just hoping after I record this, something doesn't go down in the next 30 minutes and I'm just reacting to it and giving my thoughts. I definitely feel like the luck, especially if me and Jacob were here, our luck combined, oh man, it's bad. I'm sure it would have happened 5 minutes after we had ended the recording. So with a little bit of NFL talk out of the way now, it's time to transition into player of the weeks, but then when we get into some game recaps of maybe the best weekend of college football we've seen ever, or at least in a very long time, from my perspective, and I think Jacob shared the same sentiment. So again, another installment. This is our newer segment that we've started. and it is going to be the Beyond Ball overall player of the week. This week, it was probably the game of the week for most people. I think it got the most coverage and awareness. The number one team fell to the Vanderbilt Commodores, and they were led by our overall player of the week, Diego Pavia. I mean, maybe the stats aren't all-time interim into the College Football Hall of Fame good, but 16 of 20, 252 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he had 20 for 56 on the ground. I mean, he just runs that offense to perfection almost for what they're trying to do in Vanderbilt. I mean, the options and one time on the goal line, I believe it was towards the end of the game, he did this like fake option, and then did a 360 and then rolled out and then right on the money to the tight end. I mean, he's just running that option game, the play action. He's running it to perfection there. It was great to watch. It was cinema. I'll say that 5 times later when I talk about the game. And then, since he is not here, I will have to cover his player of the week for him. Players of the week for him. This is Jacob's list. Although I agree, these are all pretty good selections. First up, it will be Wake Forest running back Desmond Claiborne, who had 20 carries, 136 yards, and 3 touchdowns over NC State in the win from this past weekend. And then a repeat appearance on Jacob's list is going to be Bowling Green tight end Harold Fannin Jr., who's probably an early favorite for the Mackey Award at this point. I say early, I guess we're like 7 weeks in now somehow. But he's probably one of the top 3-5 tight ends at minimum in the country right now, the way he's playing. Harold Fannin, 9 catches, 135 yards, and a touchdown, and the win over Akron. It's Akron, but, it's also Bowling Green. So I think that's a pretty even matchup. And then Utah State wide receiver, whose team did not play very well, if you kept up with the Boise State-Utah State game. But this dude had a game. 9 receptions for 211 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's a great stat line. It's Jalen Royals of the Utah State Aggies. So just a great game for him, even though his team was not competitive in that football game at all. And then Marshall quarterback Braylon Braxton, who is 8 of 14, 29 yards. Okay, pretty pedestrian, but 3 touchdowns through the air. And you couple that with 2 touchdowns, 15 carries, and 140 yards on the ground in a win over App State. That's pretty impressive, especially – well, I guess App State isn't that good this year. It's kind of weird to see it. I feel like App State's been really pretty good. They're flying under the radar, but not so this year. And then Ole Miss, who had a bounce-back game over South Carolina. I believe it was 27-3. Their defensive tackle, Walter Nolan, transferred from Texas A&M. He had himself a game. 4 solo tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks in their win. See what he does against LSU this week. We'll move right along into my player of the week list, which will start with a game that I incorrectly picked between the Syracuse Orange and the UNLV Rebels. I think really the thing that won Syracuse the game was LaQuint Allen, their running back. He had 19 carries for 17 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then he had 9 for 58 through the air and another 2 touchdowns. He was just pretty much looking unstoppable there, especially towards the end of the game. He really won the game for him. On the last play of the game, just absolutely fighting through that tackle and getting into the end zone to win it in overtime. That was actually a really great game. And then a Coastal Carolina Chanticleer, Ethan Vasco, who Jacob knows very well from our college football 25 dynasty that we had. He had the craziest, for whatever reason, EA gave him the craziest jump move I've ever seen. I could just hop over the goal line for touchdowns easy with him. I don't know what that was about. And they played, funnily enough, Jacob's team in that league, which was the Old Dominion Monarchs. So against them this past weekend, he had 19 for 26, 367 yards, and 3 touchdowns. A great performance for him. That's pretty much a perfect stat line for your quarterback. One of these touchdowns also went to their tight end, Cade Barong, who is Jacob, if he's listening, will know that. He's a Jacob beater. I dominated Jacob's defense in the dynasty that we had. So it's a little shout out there. Move on to my defensive player of the week, AJ Halsey of Houston, playing against TCU this past weekend. A defensive back with 5 solo tackles, a pass deflection, 2 interceptions, and then 14 return yards on those interceptions. I mean, 2 picks in a game. Some people, that's their season if they get 2 picks. So, great game. They were playing TCU this weekend. And then Pitt running back Desmond Reed versus North Carolina had 18 carries, 55 yards, and then 11 catches and 155 yards through the air, and another touchdown. His only touchdown was through the air. Great week for him. And then I have another running back here. Everybody knows about him. It's Jeanty of the Boise State Broncos, who, again, as we mentioned earlier, are playing the Utah State Aggies this week. He had 13 carries for 186 yards and 3 touchdowns. I believe on his first carry, he took it to the house, and he only played the first half. So these are his stats. 2 of the past 3 weeks, I believe he sat out 2 of the past 3 weeks, the second half of games, and I'm pretty sure the 2 games, this one and the last one, that he sat out, I think he still had over 150 yards at halftime. He's, in my opinion, he's the Heisman right now. I believe he's the clear favorite. He would definitely get my vote if I got one. I believe Jacob would share the same sentiment. Of college football, let's get into the slate that we had this weekend. Again, as I mentioned earlier, probably the best weekend of college football I've seen in a very long time. The stats here really, I think, say it all. 5 of the top 11 teams were upset. In total, 7 of the top 25 were upset this week. And then 6 of those were versus unranked teams. The only one being Missouri, who got absolutely destroyed by Texas A&M, and that was a ranked matchup. But everyone else lost to unranked teams, and there's nowhere else to start but the game of the week, and that's Vanderbilt upsetting number 1 Alabama, who was coming off of a statement win over Georgia. They almost blew the lead, and they did for a moment in the Georgia game, but came back, won that game. I mean, it was the story of the week. They moved up to number 1 over Texas. And then you come out in Nashville and you just cannot stop Vanderbilt. Whatever you do, you just cannot stop them. And I don't know if it's carrying over from the second half of that Georgia game. I don't know what it's going to do going forward. But, I mean, Vanderbilt was just pretty much moving the ball, long drives. Pretty much nothing Alabama did on defense was really consistently stopping Vanderbilt, and they were able to get the win. This is Vanderbilt's first win over an AP first-ranked team. That's not really that surprising. I think it's the first time they've beat Alabama, maybe since the 80s, I want to say. I didn't write the stat down, but yeah, Alabama's defense could not stop the pistol and option-based offense that Vanderbilt was running. And I said it earlier, Pavia's, I think he's just a seamless fit in what they're trying to run there, and you saw it on Saturday. I think everybody tuned in at the end of that game and really saw how good of a quarterback he really is. He was perfect for what they needed to beat them. The offense absolutely dominated Alabama. One of those was a turnover. Alabama did have a pick 6 that was tipped up. Although I think Jalen Miro actually played a pretty good game. I think it was their defense was the issue. But Vanderbilt won 42-17 in the time of possession battle. You normally never see that against an Alabama team, especially not a number 1 ranked one. The total yards were actually similar, which was kind of striking. It is just really, I think it's a statement of how Vanderbilt was able to dominate the clock and take out these long possessions that kept Alabama's offense off the field. After a rough start, I think the Alabama offense is when they really got going. At the beginning, they got down early. They had the turnover, and they got down early. But I think they ended up playing very well. The defense was what lost them the game. I mean, clearly, they could not stop the ground game at all. And the big shots every now and then for Vandy were working down the field. Towards the end of the game, there was one where Pavia rolled out and threw it, I don't even know, from like 40 yards downfield in the end zone. There was like no one covering someone. It was like the defensive back was about 6 yards behind the Vanderbilt receiver. And that was towards the end of the game. And I think that was, maybe not the final nail in the coffin, but one of the nails for sure for Alabama to lose that game. Penalties have kind of been a story for Alabama this season. They have had a little bit of an issue as of late, but the numbers weren't crazy high this game. I think they only had a few, really, but it's not really about, most of the time, it's not really about how many penalties you get. It's more about what point in the game, what moments are they coming in? Are they costing you and costly? I mean, are they costing you in timely possessions? And I think that was really the story of the penalty issue that they had in this game, even if the numbers weren't crazy high. Again, the offense, Murrow played, I thought, really good. The interception early on wasn't a great read, but it was also tipped up in the air. And sometimes when the ball gets tipped up in the air, there's really nothing you can do but pray that it hits the ground, no one catches it. But they were not fortunate enough. I have some notes on Ryan Williams, and that's just Ryan Williams. That's my notes. I believe he's one of the best receivers in the country already. If you just look at he had another crazy sideline catch this week that went all the way down. I don't know how he stayed in bounds. The body control on it was insane. It was really one of the best catches of the year. Only up there with, I think, his catch from last week against Georgia. That was the game winner. And this week, the body control on it was insane. And he ended up running down the sideline for a touchdown. And I believe that was in the second half of the game. The ground game for Alabama, they really didn't have the time. They got done early, and they really didn't have time to get it rolling. So the rushing yards weren't great. And then I think everybody saw the video of their safety, I believe, Malachi Moore, just had a crazy crash out at the end when Vanderbilt was kneeling the game away. It's just undisciplined. It's undisciplined, and I don't think Saban's letting that happen. Personally, no knock on Kalen DeBoer. From what I understand, it's a defensive coordinator whose name I did not write down. That is his play calls are sort of causing these reactions from the players. Now, not every player did this. I think this was just Malachi Moore. I think he needs to take a little bit of responsibility, and he did. He came out with the statement, I believe. I'm not going to read it or anything, but I know he came out with a statement saying his actions, kind of a basic apology, which was at least something. But, yeah, but at the very end of the game, he was yelling. You could see it on the TV. It was kind of funny to watch, especially seeing Alabama lose. I thought it was a good thing. Dude was yelling and punching air as they were kneeling the game away, and he threw his mouthpiece across the field. And then for whatever reason, after they were doing the final kneel, I believe, of the game. And then that was it. You could leave. You could, forget about it if you wanted to. But no, this dude walks over to the refs who are standing over the ball waiting for the next snap, the final snap, and then decides to just kick the ball. Like, the dude just walks over and kicks the ball. It's like, and then he gets a flag. It's like, what do you get out of that? I just don't understand. Besides having a little bit of a crybaby meltdown, there's really no other way to describe it. It was one of the most insane things I've seen from an Alabama player for sure. So Vanderbilt, I think, on this podcast at least, we've given Vanderbilt their respect. I think we both think they're a pretty good team. They're a bit underrated. They've already shocked a few people this year, staying in that Missouri game. Turns out Missouri isn't that good, fortunately. And then upsetting Virginia Tech week 1. I think most of us were shocked to see that. So I think this it's a step in the right direction for Vanderbilt and what they're doing. They've really never been good at football for as long as I've been alive, probably, for sure. I think it's just a step in the right direction for their program. I think it's their head coach said it. It's kind of this is what they're going to be. This is what they're building towards. These are the type of games they're expecting to start winning. Even if they're against the number one ranked team, they feel confident in themselves. Diego Pavia kind of said in his post game interview, it's just credit to the team and fighting, and not listening to everyone saying that they were going to get dominated by 50 plus, probably what most people would have predicted in this game. And we'll move on to, this is actually, I believe it was last Friday night this game happened, the Syracuse and UNLV game in OT. This was a great game. Went down to the wire. Final play touchdown in overtime by LaQuint Allen, who I mentioned earlier. He's a dog. He wanted it more on the game-winning run. I mean, he ran over those. I thought for sure he was going to go down, and he just bowled right over him, kept pushing, and got into the end zone, reached the ball in, and Syracuse won the game. Defense, there was none in this game. If you just like an old-fashioned shootout, you should have stayed up last Friday night to watch this. McCord had a crazy 63 pass attempt game for Syracuse. I don't even remember the last time I saw that many pass attempts in a single overtime game, no less. He was 40 completions, 355 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. That's just a crazy stat line in general. I think it's even crazier to even get over 400 yards with 63 pass attempts. You would expect it a little bit more, but hey, you got the win. And I think LaQuint Allen was the difference overall anyway. But I'd like to shout out really, I think there was an X factor in this game who was Arande Gadsden II, who was the tight end for Syracuse. He had 10 for 42. I mean, he had 10 catches for 142 yards. This is a guy that had 16 yards total in his last 2 weeks. After having a great start to the season, really, really making a name for himself in the pool of tight ends around the country. But then last 2 weeks, 16 yards total. What was that about? And then he comes out on Friday night in Las Vegas on television and goes 10 for 142. So I think that was an X factor for them in this game, to have that balance and to have that McCord to have that weapon that he can consistently rely on when he's not looking for LaQuint Allen. Fadil Diggs on Syracuse's defense got the clutch sack on a third down in overtime for Syracuse to force UNLV to take 3 points and then give Syracuse the ball, who eventually went down and scored their touchdown to win the game. So you didn't see a lot of defense from either team, but in the end, Syracuse were able to get that clutch sack. And then I made a mistake last week, and I forgot that Matt Sluka had the NIL issue and is no longer with the team. Heisman Williams is a very good quarterback. I think if you watch this game, he can play. Anyone who watched the game will know that he can actually he can play. He's like that. They don't need that bum Matt Sluka, who's really just there for the money. Because Malik Williams went 21 of 25, 227 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. He also had 12 for 53 on the ground and another touchdown. But one play in particular I want to highlight, it was on the goal line. The snap was high. Somehow he controlled the ball and had like the whole defensive line coming around the side. He just ran around him, got all the way around for a touchdown. I don't know why I did that in front of the camera. He went all the way around for a touchdown. That was one of the craziest scrambles I've seen. He was balling out there. He did everything they needed him to. Ricky White had a legacy game at receiver. He had 10 for 153 and a touchdown. And he also blocked a punt, which is a crazy thing for a receiver to do, and then go out there in a receiving game and play that well. So that was a little bit crazy to see. Both teams were able to run the ball pretty well. They were both over 125 each, and both were around 4 and over per carry. So, again, really no defense till the end. Syracuse was able to get that clutch stop, and then UNLV could not, and Syracuse got in the end zone to win. 17 penalties total in this game. UNLV had 9 for 108 penalty yardage, which is insane. So very costly in the end for them, even though both teams got penalized quite a bit. This is a game I incorrectly picked. I thought it was going to be a close game, so I at least got that right. I believe Jacob did pick this game right, though. I'll move right into a game that we both got horribly wrong. Number 25 Texas A&M at home, absolutely embarrassed Missouri, a top 10 team in the country, and a team that a lot of people, though they hadn't played a lot of good opponents. I think a lot of people thought they were a pretty good football team, and that they should beat Texas A&M, regardless of if it's in College Station or in Columbia. But we learned that Missouri is not like that. They aren't. This is a team I had a lot of hope for. One of my dark horse contenders before the season. I thought their schedule was easy enough. I thought we were going to see steps from Brady Cook and Luther Burden and their head coach. And then I also thought we were going to see some guys step up on defense. We did not see that. They got absolutely destroyed. Really couldn't stop anything at all that Texas A&M was running. They ran all over them. 236 rush yards for Texas A&M in this game. I don't believe we knew making our predictions that Connor Weidman was going to be playing this game. I certainly didn't, although I still would have picked Missouri. I got to be honest. I'm not going to change my vote based on that. But nothing was working on offense for Missouri. They could not run the ball at all. They couldn't really pass the game. Pass in this game very well at all. They had a 75-yard touchdown with Luther Burden, which I thought was great. I was over there doing a little fist pump. But then you get a penalty that calls it all the way back. Illegal man downfield. One of the linemen was way downfield. And that's a 75-yard touchdown you don't get. And at that point in the game, it's not completely out of control yet. A shot like that takes the momentum right back to your side. And to have it called back like that, it's just really a story of how this game went for Missouri. Texas A&M defense, we knew they were good. They dominated this game. The front seven took the Missouri O-line to school. Really no other way to put it. They had 6 sacks, 8 TFLs, and 5 pass deflection. And, I'm not saying I expected Missouri defense to play that well, but they could have at least played half of that well, and they still would have lost this game. Their defense was not able to stop anything, as I mentioned, rushing, passing. They were just in control of this game. There was never a moment where past probably the mid-second quarter, where anyone thought Missouri was going to be able to come back and win this game, even with the guys that have on offense. It's for a team I picked to be a potential contender. I just haven't liked what I've seen really in any game this year from Missouri. Even in the really bad teams that they've played, they've had a couple things that I've been like, I don't love them. And you saw that really against Vanderbilt. That's where I really was like, okay, their defense might be really horrible. And then you come into this game and you get absolutely shellacked by a pretty mid Texas A&M offense. They're not world beaters by any means. So just really, it was a surprising thing to see. I was hoping to tune into a classic, and did not get that at all. Another game that we picked last week, and that is the SMU versus Louisville game. SMU, I knew it was a good football team coming in. Now, I picked Louisville for this game. I'm not going to lie. I just thought that they were going to have a bit of a bounce back after the Notre Dame game, where it really got out of control early, and they tried to fight their way back into that game, but it wasn't as close as the score was. So I thought, even against SMU is not ranked, but even against a good SMU football team, I thought they were going to make a statement at home, and they just didn't. SMU never trailed in this game. The penalties of Louisville are really costly when you look at it. Penalties are always costly, but I think in particular, you look at them as one of the main reasons that Louisville was not able to win this game. And I just think defensively, they didn't play well enough. Obviously, I think Kevin Jennings for SMU looked really good this game. Louisville could not stop him on the ground either. He was a bit of a mobile threat this game. Really nothing – everything that SMU did and wanted to do, I think they were able to do. And defensively, they made plays when they needed to. against Louisville. Louisville almost got a break at the very end of the game, or towards the end of the game. There was an overturned fumble by SMU that ended up sealing the win. If that if that fumble stays, Louisville gets the ball. Who knows? You never know. But LJ Johnson fumbled, or LJ Johnson looked like he fumbled. Was called that, and they reviewed it, overturned it, and that really gave SMU the win there. Even though I think, again, they never trailed in this game, so it's not like it was really ever in danger. Even though it was a pretty close game for most, Louisville had to fight their way back in. Costly penalties, and they just couldn't slow down SMU. That's what lost Louisville this game. I liked the fight they showed, but that's not fight. Showing fight does not win you games. Putting up points and stopping the other team will do that. So Louisville, as far as the threat in the ACC, I don't really see it at this point. I just don't think they've stepped up when they needed to improve themselves as a ranked team. They're not ranked anymore, and I think that's a good thing. SMU, I think they're a very good football team. I think in the ACC, they may be able to even compete with a team like Clemson, who's really bounced back from a horrible start. So watch out for them in the ACC. Move on to our next game that we did pick. This was a national championship rematch, and that was Washington versus Michigan, who was ranked number 10 after a very, very, very tough loss early on in the season to Texas. Kind of fought their way back in some easier matchups and got back in as a top team in the country. Went into Seattle and really not having a quarterback is really holding this team back. Any team that really does not have a quarterback they can rely on, it's going to be hard to win games consistently. You can't always do what they've been doing, which is running the ball and controlling the time of possession and the clock, and just relying on the run game to win them games and barely passing at all. I mean, Orgy, you just cannot pass the ball at all, and they had to turn to excuse me. They had to turn to their third string quarterback in this game to come in and actually be able to pass the ball. And even then, he didn't even play that well. So if you don't have a quarterback, you're not going to be able to win a lot of games. Simple as that. And for Washington, Will Rogers, I thought he played pretty well. They used kind of a two-quarterback system, and I thought it looked really good. Demond Williams Jr. came in, who was kind of their option guy. He's a true freshman. They're kind of bringing him in. From what I remember the head coach saying something about they're trying to bring him in and get him ready for next year. When Will Rogers is not here, he takes over as their quarterback. And I thought he looked really good. He looked super fast out there. He was running by everybody. And then even when he needed to, he made a couple nice throws. They were short throws, but he made a couple nice throws when he needed to. He was able to read the plays, and realize that he needed to get that ball out or take off. So Rogers made a couple risky throws here and there that I didn't really like. He had one interception this game, and it was really a carbon copy of a play that happened earlier, where he threw it over the middle, right over the linebacker. Linebacker couldn't quite get there to make the play. And then later in the game, it was the same linebacker. Threw it over the middle again, and he jumped up and made the interception. Kind of baited him into it. I think he had read that he did that earlier, and he was able to get there this time and make the interception, which is, Will Rogers kind of will. He's a gunslinger. He's going to air it out. He's not really gonna take care of the ball all that well. If you look at his time at Mississippi State, but then coming into this game, didn't have any interceptions on the season. This was actually his first. So I thought it was just a good play by Ernest Hausman, the Michigan linebacker. The former Michigan Wolverine, Giles Jackson, who now plays for Washington as a receiver, thought he had a really good game against his former team. Him and Boston were really the two receivers in this game that looked pretty good against a good secondary. Overall, good Michigan secondary, who's had that game against Texas where they got diced up. But outside of that, I thought they had bounced back the past few weeks, even before the Texas game. One person, I believe he's their other corner outside of Will Johnson, Zeke Berry. I thought he was getting picked on the entire game. Washington was really targeting him. He did not look very good in this game. On the ground, Washington was able to run the ball mostly well with Jonah Coleman. I think he's a really underrated running back nationally. Defensively for Washington, they were able to force 2 turnovers, which is off of the third-string quarterback, so keep that in mind. I believe their quarterback fumbled, and then they were able to pick him off later in the game, which kind of sealed the deal at that point. The fumble ended up leading to a Jonah Coleman touchdown, and this was late in the fourth quarter. So Michigan, I thought, was really in this game. I was really hoping they were going to pull out the win. I had picked them, and Jacob had picked Washington. So I was hoping they were going to pull it out there at the end, but I just think they just don't have reliable quarterback play. I don't know why. I thought that they were going to be able to somehow win this game. There were some special teams errors for Washington, which was maybe one of the only knocks. They had a missed field goal and then another blocked field goal right after that. But then when you need him most, their kicker came in and got the late field goal that pretty much sealed the win. I believe that made it a 2-score game. Donovan Edwards, I will say, didn't have a very good game. I think he still owns Washington based off the national championship in this game. I thought he played pretty well. Quill Mullings actually wasn't that good. He actually had 150 yards, which has been the first time in a while. He's really taken over as RB1. So it was good to see Donovan Edwards get back to the form that I think we know he can play at. And then to see Mullings have under 50 yards was kind of surprising. But eventually they had to kind of give that up and pass the ball. And that's why they lost, because they can't. They don't have a clear wide receiver 1. And then they have Colston Loveland out there, who I just think is just getting not enough targets, even though I believe he was their leading receiver in this game. But to not have a quarterback that can really get the ball out consistently, I think is going to really hinder what Michigan's going to be able to do the rest of this year. I think Michigan's defense just didn't look good. The secondary really got cooked most of this game, and then on the ground they gave up over 100 yards. I think we saw a little bit of that Texas secondary game for Michigan. I just don't know how much of a threat they are anymore. There's not a lot to love. The defense, still has good players, but 2 games now where they've played pretty bad in the secondary. And then again on offense, no real receiver threat outside of Colston Loveland. And then not having a quarterback is going to really – they're just not going to be able to do much this year. Another USC loss. It's really depressing to watch USC now and think that LSU lost to this team, because they really – that loss just gets worse and worse. USC just does not look that good. They're not impressing. Miller Moss is not playing very well. He did not play well in this game against Minnesota, who ended up upsetting number 11 USC. Miller Moss was about at 200 yards and had 2 interceptions. They were able to run the ball pretty well with Woody Marks, who had 20 for 134 and a touchdown. But they just don't have a dude that they can go to at receiver and bring some balance on this offense. It's kind of just committee. Some guy steps up one game, and then some guy will step up in the next game. And then you'll have a game like this where no one steps up, because you don't have even Zach Branch. Like, he hasn't done much all year at all. I don't think anyone thought he was going to be, this X receiver who goes out there and routes up everyone. But they're just really not. They don't have anyone they can turn to at receiver. Both teams were able to force and recover a fumble, but USC, the difference was they had the 2 interceptions and then the penalties that really cost them. Minnesota was able to run the ball over USC. Their quarterback, Max Brosmer, did not have to do much. when you can run the ball as well as they did. But on the ground, Max Brosmer did pick up 3 goal line rushing touchdowns, which is kind of crazy to see, to scroll over and see that. When he, passing wise, didn't really have to do much, and they were able to run the ball really well with their running backs. Darius Taylor had 200 total yards in this game. So, USC was just not able to stop pretty much anything on the ground. And this was a run defense that looked pretty good against LSU. And we've learned that that's just because we can't run block. So the USC loss just gets worse and worse. USC, I don't really know where they turn to from here. A loss like this to Minnesota, giving up as many yards as they did on the ground, I just think it's going to get tougher for them this year. I don't think anyone saw them as a contender. Maybe some people after beating us week 1 did. But I thought with the way they lost to Michigan, and to come out here and to really not play well against Minnesota, I think no one's really looking at them as a contender anymore. It's just, I don't really know where they go from here. They need to get more out of Miller Moss. They need to get more consistent play from him. They need for him to stop turning over the ball and to start getting some guys involved in the receiving game to really get someone to stand out. And our nightcap upset, the game after this was almost an upset, but wasn't. This was the final upset of the day. Arkansas at home upsetting number 4 Tennessee. Tennessee's offense could not move the ball at all. They did not look good. There were no big plays. Arkansas's defense was countering those, this is a team that scores quick, and they were just not able to do that this game. They were boxed up on offense. Taylor Green was playing well against a really good Tennessee defense. He ended up going out late, and then Singleton had to come in and kind of game manage at the end. And then he also ran for a touchdown at the very end, which I think Tennessee's defense allowed him to do if you look at the replay. I think that was kind of their game plan. But yeah, Taylor Green looked good against their defense. Thought he was playing very well. Singleton came in, played smart, didn't really impress except on that run. They were able to run the ball in Tennessee. Andrew Armstrong at receiver was able to really route them up. And then in the run game, Jaquindon Jackson and Braylon Russell were just running people over. Braylon Russell is a big dude. He was running up on the last drive. He was running just people over, getting yards, getting first downs, getting them to the goal line. So to be able to play as well as they did in both the pass game and the rush game against a good Tennessee defense makes Arkansas look a whole heck of a lot better than I thought they were. Penalties really got to Tennessee in this game, and then you couple that with the offense just never getting going. The defense didn't play well either. This was just really not a lot of facets, if any, went in Tennessee's favor. 35 time possession for Arkansas to only 24 to Tennessee. And normally that probably would have been because Tennessee's putting up points very quickly. Not the case at all. They were not able to really do anything I think they really wanted to in this game against probably a team they thought they were going to dominate. And I think a lot of Tennessee fans thought that too. You isolate the last drive of this game where Tennessee needs to get in the end zone. Nico, I don't know what Nico is doing on the final play of this game. Holds the ball. The time is already run out. And then he just starts to scramble and goes out of bounds. I don't understand what he was doing. I really don't understand it at all. It was quite funny to watch. A quarterback who had played as well as he had this year to have really just a brain fart, honestly. Time runs out, you're scrambling, and then you don't even really try to get upfield or lateral or look for anyone. You just decide to take off and just kind of run out of bounds. I don't know if he didn't see the clock. I imagine he would have. To not even really at least fight through that last tackle and try to stay in bounds, get downfield maybe. Not even really have a fight, just go out of bounds. It was very confusing. I think Tennessee just needs to play the way that Tennessee's defense had been playing before this game when they come back against Florida this week. So that should be a get-right game for most teams who play Florida. I think they're going to be able to get their big plays back, but they've got to get some more balance. I don't think they were able to run the ball very well in this game. With Dylan Sampson, they need to get some more balance, get their big plays when they're there, but they need to become less reliant on them for sure. Because you have a game like this where you can't get those big plays downfield and you can't do anything on offense because that's 90% of your offense. So the final game that I mentioned earlier before this game that I talked about should have been another upset. Cal versus Miami. This was a late game. As Miami, Cal is now in the ACC, so Miami had to go all the way to Berkeley to play Cal. And early on, it looked like they wasted that trip because they were down big at halftime. Miami's offense just did not look good. Ward was making bad decisions early on. They got to start limiting these because not every team is going to have as bad of an offense as Cal does, and they're not going to be able to fight back in games if they go down like this because of mistakes that Ward is making and the offense in general just isn't looking that good. Obviously, when everyone talks about this game, it's kind of there's a couple penalties towards the last little bit of this game that once again we saw this before. The refs sort of helped Miami out. I don't know how that wasn't called targeting. I think everyone who saw that's a clear and definite targeting call. I don't know how it wasn't. So another game where there's a little bit questionable reffing for Miami to help them get the win. And then a late catch by Damian Martinez really kind of looked like an illegal forward pass, just wasn't called. Another example right there. Respect to Cal's defense, for the first half. I think it was something I didn't expect to see. I hadn't done much homework on them, got to be honest. But they're top 3 in the nation in takeaways, and they got that big pick six off of Ward early. They were able to capitalize on his mistake. So I think Cal's defense, maybe towards the end, obviously gave up some points, but they just fell apart when they had such control. I thought it was going to be another upset. It was going to be great. Because I think Miami, we haven't really seen them play a really, really good team or a really, really, really good defense like they faced Saturday. Some late calls cooked Cal, and the offense really not doing anything at all. They couldn't really string together possessions in the second half. They were 2 of 10 on third down in this game. So, your offense really doesn't help out your defense a whole lot. And then to have the refs, a couple calls go heavily against you, to get Miami to have another close win, another controversial win. Now, Miami did have penalties. Another bad penalty game, really, which they need to work on. If they want to win the ACC and compete in the playoff, they got to work on some things. Ward's got to work on his decision-making, and I think penalty-wise, they got to work on that as well. So Miami does end up holding on and getting that win, coming back and beating Cal and remaining in the top 10. And that'll really conclude the college football weekend. I mean, it was just great. So many upsets to cover. It was really unprecedented. I haven't seen a weekend like that in maybe forever, as long as I've been watching. And then move on to the NFL Week 5, which was, started out with a bang in one of the best Thursday night football games we've seen in a long time between the Bucs and the Falcons. Kadarius Hodge, who's obviously a known Falcons receiver that everyone knows about, wins it on a crazy run after catch straight down the middle of the field in overtime. Nihao Buck secondary, of course, get ready to learn Chinese, but also it's important to realize that they're young and they were also missing Antoine Winfield, probably best or second best safety in the league. And then on the D-line, they were also missing Jeanty, who I believe has been out for 2 or 3 weeks at this point. I would like to shout out Levante David from their defense, who's still playing very well at the age of 34. Was a free agent after last year, and they brought him back. And then some guy who really stood out on their defensive line I didn't know about at all was Logan Hall, who I thought was Logan Paul based on Al Michaels' call eventually. Initially on the broadcast. But it's Logan Hall on their defensive line. He had 2 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and 5 QB hits. I thought he was a standout, along with Levante David. A funny moment in this game that I'd really like to talk about, and this is switching over to the Falcons side of things, and really incorporating the defense as well, involving a player they got back, Vita Vea, who was out last week. Bucs were able to get him back for this game. Bijan Robinson tried to pick up Vita Vea one-on-one on a pass blocking rep and get absolutely blown up. Wasn't even close. I don't know why that was. Not sure what the guard was doing. When you watch the play, the guard's not really blocking anyone, so he didn't really ever look to block Vita Vea. And Bijan obviously gave up a sack, but that's not really surprising. Thought that was a funny moment. Offensively, for the Bucs, Baker had another good game. One thing, there was a screenplay to Jacob's favorite player, Rashad White. It was a screenplay, and I know that's the design of a screenplay. You want to give out to the running back or, throw it away if it's not there. But Mike Evans was wide open down the field, and if Baker looks down there, who knows how this game ends. There was literally no one on him. That was probably the only thing where I kind of expected Baker to see that and get the ball to him. But this was a Mike Evans classic game. I believe he had 2 touchdowns in this game. I think he's at 100 in his career now. So he's going to be, in my opinion, he's a Hall of Famer, not really up for debate. Running the ball in this game really wasn't for the Bucs. Rashad White's still not very good. His average, per carry in this game is really skewed by a 56-yard run that he had. So I don't think anyone's really impressed by Rashad White. Bucky Irving didn't have a great game either. They just really weren't able to do it, and they were able to lean into the pass game, which is great if that keeps you in the game. Sterling Shepard got a touchdown catch. I didn't even know he was on the Buccaneers, to be honest. Haven't heard from that dude in a while. Switching over to the winning side of things, Kirk Cousins has really turned the primetime narrative around this year. He beat the Eagles in Monday Night Football. Now he beat the Bucs at home with the best passing performance we've seen this season from anyone. He's the first 500-yard passer of the season. I believe. I don't think anyone else has even gotten over 400 yards. So Kirk Cousins, I think, is playing at a great level right now. This was probably the best passing game we've seen from anyone this year. And he was getting the ball really to Drake London, who's, I believe, in top 10 receiver talks at this point. He had another great game. He's had a good season. He has 12 for 150 yards and a touchdown in this game. They were also able to get the ball out to a Tulane legend, Darnell Mooney, who had 9 catches for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns. So the pass game really looked incredible, even if the Bucs secondary isn't good. Kyle Pitts even got involved. He had a pretty good game for his standards. But the Falcons' O-line really did have a rough day. They allowed 4 sacks and 11 QB hits on Kirk, who we understand is not mobile, but you expect more from the Falcons' O-line. I think they may have had a guy or 2 out for injury, though. But, the Falcons, to be able to win it in that manner, that was one of the craziest things I've seen, to see Kadero Hodge running that far for the game-winning touchdown. I don't think anyone expected to see that. This was just one of the best Thursday night games I've seen in a long time. And moving on to, not really a primetime game, I guess, but it was the only game on. And that was the London game between the Jets and the Vikings. This was a pretty smelly offensive game, both ways. I thought both the defenses played really well. The Jets offense really didn't get anything going. The Vikings offense really wasn't as efficient as we've seen. Sam Darnold didn't play as well. The Vikings really couldn't run the ball very well once Aaron Jones went out. Ty Chandler, who's been a nice complimentary piece, got kind of exposed in this game. And it's just a credit to both defenses, really. I was high on the Jets defense. I thought they were really good, but I was not expecting the Vikings offense, which has been really one of the best in the league, to look this bad. Jefferson didn't have even a catch in the second half, so to be able to do what they did against him until I believe the end of the fourth quarter, he had a couple catches towards the end, but for like 2 quarters, I don't think Justin Jefferson had a catch after the first drive, I want to say. Speaking of early in this game, there was a really weird fumble by Ty Chandler. It was just a pitch play, and it just, I don't know what happened. It bounced off his hands. Jets were able to get the ball, but then Jets can't do anything on offense. Rodgers had 2 INTs early in this game. They kind of overshadowed the turnover for the Vikings. Neither O-line was out there playing all that well, in my opinion. But, again, credit to both of the defenses, I think. Although the Jets' offensive line issue has kind of been a chronic thing at this point. The penalties, I think, were prevalent on both sides. The Jets couldn't really establish the run. They were getting penalties, and then the O-line not playing well. Breece Hall has not looked good this year at all. Even Braylon Allen really couldn't get anything going, who's at times played better than Breece Hall this year, as crazy as that seems. So the Jets were able to disrupt the Vikings offense, but when you can't produce any of your own, it doesn't really matter. Until late in the game when they almost fight their way back into it. To put together a couple of drives on the Vikings defense, I thought was pretty impressive. But again, what I talked about earlier, the game-sealing interception, he's just not on the same – Rodgers isn't on the same page as his receivers right now. And this is really prevalent on a play like that. So the Vikings were able to get the win and stay undefeated, and I believe entering their bye this week. And then the Jets we will see on Monday night next week. We'll see how that goes. I think a lot of things are going to change for the Jets over the next week. So a cinema game from this weekend, I think it was probably the best game. Bengals-Ravens. I mean, this was just offense. This is a QB duel. Burrow played his best game this year. Lamar was out there playing really well as well. When the Ravens couldn't get the rushing game going, Lamar goes out there and has a really good game. Burrow had 30 of 39, 392 yards, 5 touchdowns. Obviously, the interception, that's what everyone wants to bring up in this game towards the end, where you can get down the field, run the clock out, and then he turns it over. Marlon Humphrey makes a rare good play from this year, gets in front of it, gets the interception. The Ravens did give it back to him on a fumble by Lamar later. But even then, if you hold on to that ball, you don't throw the interception, you can maybe run the clock out or at least, get in field goal range and you don't have a botched snap like they did in overtime. I thought this was probably Burrow's best game of the year, I think. And probably the offense, the passing offense itself, this was probably their best performance. Chase, this is why he deserves his money. 10 for 193 and 2 touchdowns. I mean, this dude always plays well against the Ravens. T. Higgins, really as of late, has been playing very well. He missed some games at the start of the season. He had 9 for 83 and 2 touchdowns. So I think it sucks to really realize that the Bengals are probably not going to bring this duo back after this year. And really the trio, Burrow, Chase, and T, they're not going to be able to have after this year, most likely, based on what's going on so far. And they can't really contend because their defense is absolutely horrendous. The Ravens weren't really able to run the ball very well with Derrick Henry in this game. The Bengals always, when you look at the stats, for some reason always played Derrick Henry very well. I don't know why. For whatever reason that is. I don't know if it's a Lou Anarumo thing. Who just knows what to do. But the Ravens' pass defense, however, was really coming off of a good week versus the Bills. That was an impressive win in primetime. But now it's back to, okay, I'm concerned again for their secondary because they just absolutely shredded. Now the Bills don't have receivers like Chase and T. Higgins, but I thought they were going to take a step in the right direction in the secondary, and it just didn't happen. And they're going to be tested again this week, I think, with Jaden Daniels. But to really wrap up this game, Zay Flowers had a really good game, 7 for 111. That's what you want to see out of your hopeful guy that's going to step up and be your wide receiver one going forward. The Ravens were able to run the ball well on the second worst rush defense, even though Derek didn't run the ball very well until that long 51-yarder in OT that really put the nail in the coffin. I was kind of hoping he would get in the end zone so we could have another long game-winning touchdown like that. Just great to see Derek still putting up, still leading the league in rushing, and then to break that one off, even when he's not having a good game, to still be able to do that. Mark Andrews, I got him on one of my fantasy teams, and man, he's just so depressing. He's still not doing much. Charlie Kohler, I believe their third-string tight end, even had more yards and a touchdown compared to Mark Andrews. It's just really frustrating to watch. Hopefully they can get him going forward. Going forward, they can get him more involved this week against the Commanders. I thought this was a kind of upsetting to watch if you're a Bills fan. The Bills-Texans game. It just looked so winnable there at the end with the mistakes that the Texans were making. And then to go 9 of 30, even if he does have that fall where I think was kind of mismanaged by the concussion protocol, but Josh Allen to go 9 of 30. I was told this guy was the MVP. Really didn't have a good game against the Ravens, all that good of a game against the Ravens last week, and then 9 of 30. Even before he went down with the injury, I thought he wasn't playing all that well. And the offense in general wasn't. Their final drive was really frustrating. They have it near their own goal line, and they throw it deep for 3 straight times and give the Texans the ball back almost in field goal range already to get in and to end up kicking the game-winning field goal for the Texans. 3 of their 14 on third down, but they really they did run the ball pretty well, even if the pass game did not get going at all. And that was James Cook going for 82 on 20 carries, also picking up a touchdown. I liked how the Bills really fought back in this game, but they just don't have a clear number one weapon, and that's really hurting them. That's why I mentioned him earlier in the Devontae sweepstakes. Keon Coleman had a big touchdown in this game. Maybe he'll step up going forward. I think really most people thought Stroud and the Texans were going to dominate after the start that they had, but some mistakes ended up happening, and they weren't able to do that. 2 targets for Nico, but he ended up going out. Even on those 2 targets, he ended up going for a long touchdown, but he ended up going out with an injury, so that'd be something to watch going forward. This was the Stephon Diggs revenge game. He was good, maybe not great. I think he had about 80 yards. So, good performance because he hasn't played crazy well this year so far. So, good to see for especially, you're going to potentially lose Nico going forward. So, it's good to see Diggs go ahead and step up for this game. They just need to get Mixon coming back for their running game to get going, and then fixing some O-line play. But the Texans were able to hold on, kick that game-winning field goal, and pick up the win. The Cardinals-Niners game, the Niners, they had this game in the bag, and they just really like to sell leads, I guess. This is another game this year where they sold against the Niners. They did it again. Ayuk finally had a good game, but Debo did absolutely nothing in this game. Jordan Mason had a good game. I thought he'd have more, especially against the Cardinals defense, but he's putting up a performance as the running back one in this team. I don't think anyone can really blame him for anything going forward. The injury to their kicker, Jake Moody, actually did end up affecting things towards the end. They went for, I think it was like a 4th and 20 because they just didn't have a kicker to stay in range. And that ends up, you don't have those points and ends up costing you this game. The Cards defense surprisingly won this game. They got 2 batted INTs and then a forced fumble. The interception on the Niners' last drive really sealed the game for the Cardinals. Offensively, there's just not enough Marvin Harrison for them. But McBride was back. Trey McBride was back in this game, and I thought he had a pretty good game. Kyler didn't play all that well. He did have a very good touchdown run where he was celebrating from like 40 yards out. So I thought that was really good to see that part of his game get going. But overall, I think the defense is what won this game for the Cardinals. And then the Niners, I don't know what. They just need to stop selling leads. This was a snooze fest, this next game. Cowboys Steelers. I fell asleep with the TV on and a computer in my lap because this game had got delayed and it was really late and there was no offense happening at all. I waited out the rain delay, hoping it was going to be a great game. Was not. Should have just finished my homework. Ended up really having to speed that up the next morning to get it done. The Steelers defense, they forced 3 turnovers, but really couldn't pull out the win because of the offense. And as well at the end, they gave up a ton of yards to Dak towards the end of this game that lost them. Fields, I think he's back to Fields. I think me and Jacob in particular, I think we're really kind of overreacting to how Fields was playing to start this year. I think he's back to about what we can expect. He's not having crazy success. They were 3 of 12 on third downs in this game. The George Pickens thing, I don't really want to even get into it, but he's just not playing well enough for, I think, how good he thinks he is. He's just not playing up to that at all. They couldn't run on the worst rushing defense in the league. I know they didn't have Jalen Warren and Najee Harris sucks, but that really hinders you. I think that's been kind of a strength, especially using Fields in the running aspect, has been a strength of theirs. And that's why they had the record that they had. This is the second straight week where the secondary really didn't look good for the Steelers. Joe Flacco diced them up, and then you had this towards the end of the game where Dak was dicing them up as well. So that's something to really be concerned about going forward. They had a fumble on the last play of this game where I think some interaction happened with George Pickens and one of the Cowboys players. But at that point, the game was lost. For the Cowboys, Dak down the stretch, I thought looked pretty good. It was a great game by Rico Dowdle, who I suppose is their number 1 running back. CeeDee Lamb didn't go all that crazy in this game. It was actually a Jalen Tolbert legacy game. 7 for an 87, and then he had the game-winning touchdown, the eventual game-winning touchdown in the fourth quarter. So this was a snooze fest. I think when I fell asleep, it was like 6-3 or something like that. There was really not any offense going at all. So I just wasn't worth staying up there past the rain delay, that's for sure. And this is where I'll have to fill in for Jacob. Talking about these Saints and Chiefs Monday Night Football game from last night. Was not that great of a game to watch. I'm going to actually pull up Jacob's notes, which I asked him to send to me. The first thing he has on here, of course, is Patrick fucking Mahomes. I think it was really upsetting Jacob doing what Mahomes does in timely moments. I just thought he played very well against the Saints. Jacob has on here, what can I even say about this team? I mentioned earlier, Carr will be out for a few weeks. It's probably Spencer Rattler's season. And then the linemen up front, which was kind of a makeshift group from what I understand, really got whooped in this game. I thought the Chiefs were able to absolutely dominate the Saints up front. Jacob would like to shout out, and I would like to also acknowledge the Kalen Saunders, who had the tipped interception on the goal line and then returned it for 20 yards as a defensive tackle. I didn't really even know much about him, and it seems like Jacob didn't either before this game, but that was a great play. It was really, really fun to watch. And then a couple stats that Jacob has provided for me to really help describe his team, and that would be Derek Carr in the first half, who had 9 for 14, 85 yards, a touchdown, and interception at half. This was an offense that looked near unstoppable passing-wise in the first quarter. I mean, the first 2 games of the season. And to have those stats at halftime, I mean, the passing game really just could not get going. I thought Carr wasn't making all that good of decisions either. Rushing the ball, there was no rushing the ball for the Saints in this game. They had 46 total rushing yards. And then at halftime, I believe Kamara had about 18 yards on like 8 carries. So really nothing. And it wasn't even out of that. Well, the game wasn't even out of that control. They just could not move anything up front against the Chiefs and run the ball consistently. Chris Olave, 4 targets in this game. Supposed to be the wide receiver 1. 2 catches for 10 yards. It's not good. Yeah, you can't run the ball and you can't get it to your number 1 receiver, supposedly. Enough, 4 targets, and then 2 catches for 10 yards. And then defensively, they allowed a Kareem Hunt legacy game, simply put. He had over 100 in this game. We haven't seen him really have that good of a game probably since a couple of years at this point. And then to end off, Jacob would like me to quote, Paulson fucking Adebo, if I see one more PI, I'm killing myself. And that's just a sentiment I can actually see why he would say that. Watching this game, Adebo, man, he had a costly I just thought he was costing the Saints more than he was helping them in this game. So that was my best attempt at covering for Jacob. I'm sure it would have been a lot more comedic if he were here. A little bit of before we get into Week 7 picks for college football, a little bit of a picker record update. I had a bad week in my college football pick'ems. I'm now sitting at 9-10, and Jacob is up to 11-8. I've fallen under 500. I'm just not very good at college football pick'ems, it seems. Hoping I can do better with this slate of games, which is a fantastic one. The first up would be OSU at number 3 Oregon. That is number 2 Ohio State. So this is a 2 versus 3 matchup. Ohio State really has not played anyone. It's hard to really get a good test or a good read on how good they are. Will Howard really hasn't been that good, even with the opponents they've played. He's had 1 turnover in each of his last 3 games, and they weren't, competitive, highly ranked teams he was playing either. I just think Will Howard needs to watch the turnovers in this game, or things could get out of hand. Ohio State's defense has been great, but they've really, haven't really played anyone. It's hard to really understand how good, if any, they are. They have talent, obviously, but they need to lean on the run game if they want to beat Oregon. Oregon got, simply put, ran through by Ashton Jeanty in the Boise State game. They were still able to win and overcome that, but I want to credit that more to Ashton Jeanty being a way better running back than Judkins. I think that was really the reason that happened. I think Oregon's going to key in on that so they can take that away and force Will Howard, who hasn't looked exceptional, to be able to pass the ball a little bit more. Then for Oregon, I think a key to this game is going to be really their secondary, how well they can play. Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka is going to be a big test for them. So, though they've played well through this part of the season, this is their first real test against really good receivers. Oregon, we've at least seen that they can beat a pretty good Boise State team. They're really leaning on Ashton Jeanty, but they at least have that win under their belt. A little bit more trust in Dylan Gabriel over Will Howard for sure. So I'm going to say Oregon in this game is going to get it done. And I think most people would probably go with Ohio State. I believe they're giving up like 7 points a game. But again, haven't really played anybody. I don't really know how good they are. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a great game. But I'm going to take Oregon. And then this is our second game. Was going to be a ranked matchup, but then USC went out and lost to Minnesota. So it is Penn State, number 4 Penn State, which I saw that in the rankings. I was like, I don't know what they've done to be number 4, but here we are. Going to USC. I'm going to take Penn State in this game. There's not too much to say. USC's run defense, I think, is going to get run through. They gave up 200 yards to Darius Taylor of Minnesota last week. And Penn State has Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. I think they're going to have a great game. Miller Moss has been falling off slowly. I think really I don't see how that's going to get much better. This is a really good Penn State defense. They got after Altmaier in the game against Illinois. I think they're going to be able to bother Miller Moss, make him look comfortable. And then there's no real wide receiver one threat for USC that I think Penn State's really going to have to worry that much about. I just don't think this is going to be a really close game. I'm going to take Penn State, not really thinking twice. The next game is the Red River rivalry. It's number 1 Texas playing against number 18 Oklahoma. It's probably the best offense in the country, speaking on Texas. And the OU secondary has really not been good. Though their defense does average 2 takeaways. Could be something to watch out for. But I don't think Texas is going to have any issue moving the ball. Passing-wise, I believe Ewers will be back for this game. And even then, Arch Manning has been playing great when he's came in. So I think Isaiah Bond and Ryan Wingo are able to have legacy games against OU. Offensively for Oklahoma, you're looking at Michael Hawkins Jr. He just has to play within the offense. I don't think he totally impressed anyone in that Tennessee game, but as far as becoming playing at a top quarterback level, I don't think that's what they're expecting. I think we should just expect Michael Hawkins to play within the offense, run it well. I think they need to keep Texas off the field as much as possible because I think they're going to be trying to score quick, and it could get out of hand. And move on to – I'm going to take Texas in that game. Pretty clear there. Move on to the final game that we're going to be featuring in our pick'em for this week. I'm going to be taking LSU in a matchup against number 9 Ole Miss. LSU did not move up in the rankings. We are still number 13. This is a game completely based on our run defense, in my opinion, and limiting the big plays for Ole Miss. Our run defense has been getting better, but the talent has not been good at all. UCLA is one of the worst rushing offenses in the country that we played, and then also South Alabama, who's a high-scoring offense but really leaned on their passing game. If we can limit their big plays and limit their running game, if Parrish gets going for Ole Miss, I think this game could be blown open. Trey Harris needs to be a focal point, their receiver, for our defensive backs. There's not a lot of trust I could put into our defensive backs. Based on what we've seen, I think they've played a little bit better overall as a defense, but again, haven't really played anybody. Coming off the bye, I'm hoping that gave us some extra time to game plan, and we can come out and shut down particularly the Ole Miss running game. Offensively, I'm not really threatened by Ole Miss's secondary at all. They don't have anyone that really stands out who I think is going to be able to limit any of our receivers and the way our passing offense has been playing this year. I think Nussmeier is going to air it out. Needs to be careful. His decision-making sometimes can be costly and force turnovers. But I'm not really concerned about playing their secondary. We need to establish the run with Caden Durham. Josh Williams wants to get a couple carries. That's fine. But Caden Durham needs to be our feature back, in my opinion. You saw that against South Alabama and against South Carolina, where he had very good games and looked explosive. We have to win the line of scrimmage, running the ball. That's been an issue this year, run blocking. And then pass blocking, we need to be careful for Walter Nolan, who's going to want a game wreck. And then I'm not sure if Princely Omanliman is going to play for Ole Miss, one of their edge rushers. I think he missed last week, so I'm not sure if he'll be playing. But that's going to be something to watch. We're going to need to be able to protect Nuss, let him sit back there, air the ball out to the receivers. But I'm going to take LSU in this game. We'll move on to our NFL Pick'em record update before we move into some Week 6 picks for the NFL. I am now sitting at 46-32 in the Pick'em, and Jacob is now 37-41. This was a rough week to say the least. Last week was in Pick'em for NFL. We both did not do very good at all. But we will hope to bounce back this week. We will not be talking about all these games, or I will not be talking about all these games. But we'll get through some of the key ones, and that obviously starts with the Thursday night primetime game. 49ers at the Seahawks. I'm going to be taking the Niners in this game. The Seahawks sort of lost my trust with how they lost to the Giants at home last week. I thought it was pretty embarrassing. This is a team that was really banged up against the Lions, and I thought they still played very good. And then to come out, you got a couple of your guys back, and you came out and played like that against the Giants. They just need to get everyone back healthy this week. And I understand that Tariq Woolen and Uchenna Nwosu did go out last week against the Giants. They're going to need everyone back healthy this week for this game. Although the Niners very well could blow a lead, I'm going to go ahead and take the Niners in this game. And this is going to be a pretty shortened, I think, Titans segment. I'm going to go ahead and take the Colts in our game against the Titans. There's not enough that I've seen from our offense. One game against the Dolphins does not impress me at all, especially with Will Levis is going to be coming out. There's nothing I've seen from Will Levis that makes me think that he's not going to turn the ball over 2 to 3 times this game. I'm really worried if the Colts run out with Joe Flacco compared to Anthony Richardson, because Anthony Richardson has not been efficient. If we can just take away his deep shots, I think we would be pretty okay against him. But if we play Flacco, I think over the middle in particular is where he's been liking to throw in his 2 games, and that's where we have a weakness in our linebackers who are not very good. So Alec Pierce, this is a guy I don't like very much. He's been a Titans killer in the past. But this year, he's actually playing well against other teams, so that scares me a whole heck of a lot. I'm really not too worried about Pittman. We don't have Christian Fulton, who Pittman always had legacy games against. I don't think Pittman's going to be able to do a whole lot. I'm hoping our secondary holds up. Awuzie obviously is going to be out for a while, but Brownlee stepped up in a big way. Jarvis Brownlee did last week. So I think he's going to be able to step in and be fine. I'm not too worried about the Colts receivers. More about how our defense is going to hold up versus Joe Flacco. And over the middle with some underneath stuff, I think Josh Downs could have a big game. Even if Jonathan Taylor comes back for the Colts, we generally play him very well. Especially we have Sweat, who's a top 10 interior defensive lineman so far this season. And we should have Jeffrey Simmons back for this game, hopefully, who needs a statement game. The Colts will be missing their guard, Will Fries. So I just need Jeff to not have any stupid penalties and to actually show that he earns this contract and be a face of this team. The O-line for the Colts did get worked last week. I think Harold Landry, Simmons, Sweat, I think those guys are going to have pretty big games to make their presence felt. The Colts secondary is not that good at all. We need to involve our trio of Ridley, Hopkins, and Boyd more. Please, I need more targets for all of them. Although we're probably going to have to see Will Levis, which is just depressing. There's nothing I've seen that tells me he's going to come out here and play good, even if he gets a horrible defense we're playing. This game will be won or lost by our offensive line or William Levis. The offensive line, I don't even want to get into it. I'll be here for 20 minutes. But had a overall better week against the Dolphins, even if that was not a great defense we were playing. Levis needs no turnovers in this game. Like I said, this is probably the worst defense we've seen so far this year. Even if they do average 2 takeaways a game, I'm not really worried about their corners. Hopefully, if we can get separation, this is a middle of the pack defense we're playing in terms of sacks. But they could line up that Colts fan named Seth who does the "This Is Our Colts" song, and he would probably be able to get sacks. I think versus the right side, who's MPF, who's a terrorist, and then also Dylan Raduns, who's more of a run blocker. This is also the second worst rush defense in the league, and they just let Tank Bigsby really dominate them last week. So I think Pollard and Spears need a whole heck of a lot of involvement. Spears needs more carries. I think it needs to be more balanced, even though Tony Pollard has looked really good, in my opinion, considering the circumstances. And I think both of the running backs need more utilization in the passing game, especially if that's easier for Levis to just dump it down on a screen or underneath route. And then defensively, we got to get some takeaways. We finally got one in our last game against the Dolphins, but that's the only one we have on the season. So hopefully we can finally get some more takeaways. I think, as I said, I'm really worried about our linebackers in this game. Flacco's been going over the middle a lot, especially versus the Steelers. I thought it was really prevalent, as able to carve up that defense. So I'm pretty worried. This is a defense that got cooked by Malik Willis, so we'll see. I just don't think we're going to be able to hold up, honestly. And then offensively, I don't think we're going to be able to do much, even if it's a really bad defense. I just don't want number one thing. We lose this game. Please do not get a punt blocked. I will lose my mind if we get another punt blocked. We did not have one the past 2 weeks, so that is improvement. Then the Bucs and the Saints game will be coming up next to talk about. The Bucs passing offense is building off of a couple great weeks, and then the Saints pass defense is, I believe, bottom 6 in the league currently right now where they're ranked. So I think the passing offense for the Bucs is going to have a big day. I think there's not going to be any worries. I don't think the Saints offense is going to be able to move a whole heck of a lot consistently. And then you couple that in with you not having Derek Carr out there already with an offense that was struggling the past 2 weeks. Really last week, I guess, the Falcons, they played well, I think. But with Spencer Rattler or Jake Haener running out there as your quarterback for the Saints, not too worried if I'm the Bucs defense, even if I'm not super high on them at all. And then Marcus Lattimore versus Mike Evans. I think that's going to be a great matchup. I think it's going to be another classic. These two guys, I think, actually hate each other, to be honest. So I'm really excited to watch that matchup. And then we'll move into probably one of the games of the week, honestly. And that's going to be the Commanders at the Ravens. I said this earlier. The secondary for the Ravens is really concerning me again after the last week's performance that they had. I thought they would string together a couple good games after the Bills win, and they didn't. The Commanders' offense is elite right now, and it feels weird to say. I don't think anyone predicted this coming into the season, but they're second in points per game. They're second in rush yards. They're second in touchdowns. Even if they haven't played a whole slew of great defenses either, although they completely dismantled the Browns' defense, which is kind of a shell of itself at this point. So this is their first big test, I think, as a team to play the Ravens, and especially in a hostile environment. The Commanders, the Commanders really like to run the ball, as I just stated. They're second in rush yards per game, but this is the best run defense in the league in the Ravens that they're playing. I want to see how the Commanders answer if their run game gets shut down, and if they have to turn to Jaden, who I think can do it, and I think we've seen that. He's playing at a top 5 quarterback level probably right now. If he has to backpack and just win by passing the ball or scrambling and running the ball, if they can't hand it off and run for consistent yardage, I want to see how that goes. I'm actually going to take the Commanders in this game. I just think Commanders' offense is too good. I think they're going to be able to pass the ball very well. So I'm going to take the upset pick and take the Commanders. The Cardinals-Packers game, I'll kind of breeze through this one. I'm going to take the Packers. Jordan Love still concerns me. I thought he didn't look great last week after looking pretty bad against the Vikings 2 weeks ago. Love looked really careless. He had a Levis app play in the end zone where he was going down, falling down, and just flings it out. And the Rams corner's right there, takes it in for a pick six. That was one of the weirdest plays I've seen. I think that was actually worse than Will Levis week one against the Bears, where he kind of had something similar and just flipped it out for a pick six. Just falling down, flings it out there. Looked pretty careless. But I think they need to lean on the run with Josh Jacobs, and that's going to give them a good shot to win this game. The Packers defense is first in takeaways. I think the front seven should have an impact. I'm not too impressed by the Cardinals' offense. Their defense is opportunistic, and I think that's how I would describe them for last week. So they're going to need to do so again against Love, who's playing at a pretty careless level right now. Another big game to talk about will be the Lions and the Cowboys. I think this is going to be a big win for the Lions, to be honest. If they really lean into the run game, this is a horrible Cowboys run defense. I think that Gibbs and Monty are going to have really good games. I think single-handedly that could win the Lions this game. I'm going to go ahead and take the Lions. It's not even going to be close, in my opinion. The Cowboys' red zone defense is horrible. Goff might catch a touchdown again for all I know. Dak is probably going to dice up the Lions secondary. That's going to be the only way they even might be able to stay in it, is if he does that. And then there's not going to be any balance for the Cowboys on offense. That's kind of been the story for them, because this is a pretty good Lions run defense. So I just think they're not going to be able to rely on the pass game to win this. I just don't think they are. And even then, their defense isn't that good. So I think the Lions are going to get a big win. The Sunday night football game for this week is the Bengals at the Giants. I'm going to take the Bengals. If the Bengals defense cannot stop the Giants, it's going to be – we're talking about – they're already one of the worst in the league, but we're talking about absolute worst in the league. If they come out there and get shredded up by the Giants offense, in my opinion. Tyrone Tracy could have a really good game. The Bengals' run defense is horrible. The Giants are going to need Malik Neighbors to play in this game. He didn't play last week. That's going to be really the only way that's going to give him a good shot, because I think Neighbors would have a very good day against the Bengals defense. The Giants defense is first in sacks, surprisingly, something I was surprised to learn. But the Bengals O-line, surprisingly, compared to years past, has played much better this year compared to previous years when you look at their pass blocking grades. The Bengals pass game is going to have no issues in this game. It's going to carry right on over from a fantastic week that they had against the Ravens. So I'm going to take the Bengals in this game. I think Zach Taylor could get fired if they lose this game, to be honest, if the Giants somehow pull this off. Then the final game of the slate that we're going to talk about is the Bills and the Jets, and that's the Monday Night Football matchup for this week. I went back and forth on this. I think this was a hard game to pick. Firing their head coach, I almost let affect my pick, but I'm going to be sticking with the Jets here. I'm going to take the Jets. I believe Jacob took the Bills for this game, but I'm going to go ahead and take the Jets. I think the Bills' pass game's really struggled the past 2 weeks. I think the Jets' defense is going to show up in a big way. They played very good against the Vikings' offense, and I don't think the Bills' offense is on that level, especially when that struggled recently. I don't necessarily think the offense of the Jets is going to get much better unless they get Devontae Adams before Monday, which could happen. I think losing Saleh, it's not going to really make the offense any better. As I said, Nathaniel Hackett is still here. So I think the issues are still going to be there. I just think they need to throw it to Garrett, and I think they need to throw it to Mike Williams over someone like Allen Lazard, even if the rapport is there with Aaron Rodgers. I think Brees needs to finally have a good game. This is a really horrible Bills run defense. And if not, give Braylon Allen the reins because I think he's a really good running back. At times, again, he's looked better than Breece Hall this season. The Jets are last in rushing currently, and this is really a testament to their offensive line not playing well and Breece Hall not playing well. So they're going to need that this week. I think against as bad of a run defense as the Bills, I think that kind of cancels out. Where one of them in the Jets, either Breece Hall or Brandon Allen's going to have a great game, in my opinion. I don't think Josh Allen's going to go 9 of 30 again in this game, but this is a very tough Jets defense. I think everyone respects them around the league, especially, again, based off of last week. Someone has to step up for the Bills as wide receiver 1 for Josh Allen if they're going to want to stay in this game. I don't know if Keon Coleman's going to carry that over from the touchdown he had against the Texans, but they're going to need somebody to step up. They did not have Khalil Shakir in that game. I don't know if he's going to be back. That's kind of their wide receiver 1 at this point. I don't know if he's going to be back for this game, but that would be a big boost for them. They're going to need to lean into the run with James Cook, but I don't think it's going to. I don't think that's going to be the thing that wins in this game if the Bills do win. I think it's going to be the improvement of the pass game compared to last week. The penalties for the Jets and Aaron Rodgers making bad decisions is what lost them last week. We don't normally see that game from Aaron Rodgers. It's been a long time since he's thrown 3 picks in a game. So if they can clean up the bad decision making and then the penalties, I think it's going to give them a chance to win this game. I think their offense is going to not look a whole heck of a lot better, but I think this is the game where their run offense gets going. Whether that's Breece or Braylon, I think that's going to end up winning them this game. With that will wrap up what should have been a celebratory episode, pod number 10 of Beyond Ball. Of course, Jacob had to miss this one, and I believe next week it will be just me again. He has, I believe it is some sort of frat obligation that he has to do. So thank everyone for watching and to coming back for the 10th episode of Beyond Ball, and we will see you next week.